Welcome to another edition of Park Talk Podcast, the official podcast of the Naperville Park District. Welcome back to the State of the Park District podcast with our theme of shaping a sustainable future in parks and recreation. In this episode titled Keeping Our Parks and Facilities Green, we will explore the importance of the district's environmental stewardship core value and also learn how we put it into practice in a variety of ways across our parks and golf operations. Please join me in welcoming Director of Parks Tim Quigley, Director of Golf Kevin Carlson, and Riverwalk and North Parks Operations Manager Tiffany Pico. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Sam.
So let's jump right into it. I know we have a lot to talk about as far as green and the Park District and everything that we do from those perspectives. So, Tim, I'm going to start with you. Environmental stewardship is not just a phrase that we use at the district. It's something that we put into practice across the board. Can you explain first why stewardship of our natural resources and our specific practices are important? And secondly, can you give a couple of examples of things that the Parks Department does that shows that we walk the walk?
Sure. So one of the district's 6 core values is environmental education, stewardship, and sustainability. Mm-hmm. And then we focus on promoting natural resource management as well as promoting sustainability initiatives. Our core values serve as a standard that guides our operations, decision-making, and organizational mindset. With that in mind, we're not aiming just to meet industry-accepted best practices, but rather to be at the forefront of new development. In the Parks Department, it's our duty to care for the properties owned by the district to ensure that our residents can enjoy these spaces today and in the future. So stewardship can come in many forms. For the district, it may appear in the form of protecting and preserving our natural resources. Mm-hmm. Large tracts of undeveloped land, such as Knock Knolls, come to mind, where you might find several rare species of plants. It might emerge in the form of practices our staff incorporates into our maintenance activities or design. Something as simple as utilizing our water bottle filling stations or the installation of solar panels on some of our facilities are a great example.
Okay.
And it could come in the form of encouragement of civic action or public education. We've got a thriving volunteer program staffed by residents willing to donate their time to help care for our parks. Mm-hmm. And our website is full of great content providing details on several of our green initiatives. I won't get into too many details here, but as I mentioned, our website is a great place to start for those who'd like to learn more. There you can find things like our annual sustainability report, learn about several of our ongoing practices, such as our Sustainable Parks Initiative, Park Meadow projects, our LEED certified green buildings, and our recent membership into the B20 Club of Illinois for our use of biodiesel fuels. We're always on the lookout for new concepts, products, or ideas that would be of benefit to the district and for the Parks Department in the areas that we manage.
Wow, that's a lot. Just hearing you enumerate everything that we've got out there from a sustainability perspective, it just makes me realize that we've really come a long way in even the last 5 years. I was going to say 10 years, but really the last 5 years, there's just been so much more emphasis on what we're doing from an environmental perspective.
It's been a really neat journey, and it's something that continues to evolve each and every year. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that just our maintenance departments focus on, but sure. As you know, our entire district and staff really work on promoting new ideas and concepts.
Well, it's part of our culture.
Absolutely.
Kevin, in what ways do the golf courses embrace environmental stewardship?
Well, similar to what Tim has talked about, our staff is looking to manage our facilities and courses using practices that promote environmental stewardship and sustainability. Getting into some of the details, one main goal we have is trying to reduce the amount of synthetic fertilizer that we use mm-hmm. and pesticides.
Okay.
That's a key practice that we look to manage at both our golf courses. Staff has been investigating and using more fertilizers now that are organic-based, and those have a multitude of benefits, including it's better for the structure of the soil. There's a lot less runoff that can go into our streams and waterways that are around our facilities. And that helps overall to improve the water quality, and in some cases allows us to use less pesticides in some of those aquatic areas too. We're looking to explore alternatives for reducing our pesticide use. We basically base all our decisions on how we apply pesticides on a practice called integrated pest management. And the way that works is, one of the key parts of that is to try to maintain a healthy plant all the time. A healthy plant is able to fight off the stresses of disease, insects, other issues that may have come across during a stressful part of the season a lot better than a plant that might be in a weaker state that's not as healthy. You kind of go back to the old adage, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, that's very similar to what we're trying to do with our plants, our turf, trying to keep them healthy so we don't have to apply as much pesticides to try to manage diseases and other issues that may come up.
That's really interesting. And that's not only good for people going to the golf courses and to our parks, but it's also healthier for the plants, as you said, and just the habitat in general, all the animals that are around as well.
Oh, absolutely. It touches a little bit of everything. So the people that are out at our parks, our golf courses, know that we're managing them with the mindset that we're trying to do it environmentally safe and practices that are going to make sure we have a healthy turf, plants, and everything else, while reducing the amount of pesticides and other synthetic fertilizers that we normally would see at other places.
So the next question is going to be for Tim or Tiffany. I'm not sure which one of you wants to take this, but I'll go ahead and pitch it. The district has taken an active role in being good stewards of the environment and continues to put time and effort into restorations that impact shorelines, woodlands, park meadow, and native plantings. Can you give an overview of what each of these three types of projects are all about and why they're important initiatives?
Sure, I'll go ahead and take that one. I've got a little bit of background on some of these things, and each one kind of has its own unique goal in mind, and they're all similar but different. So the shorelines kind of applies to both the riverbank shorelines, our small streams, and our pond buffers that we have out there. In a large suburban city like Naperville, one of the main challenges to the health of our ponds and streams is the increase in hard surfaces. When rain falls, it runs across surfaces into storm drains and then gets pushed out into the river. So it carries a lot of pollutants along with it as it travels across that land. So keeping the stream banks healthy that can actually help filter out some of those things is very important. We also want to try to reduce erosion out there. We have partnered with the DuPage County Stormwater Management Department for several projects recently, including that it's going to help reduce erosion and improve water quality. Shoreline restoration projects include removing invasive plant material, shoreline stabilization with core rolls or regrading, and then installing native plants. The native prairie plants are very important in reducing erosion. They have a deep network of roots that helps hold that soil in place when you have fluctuating water levels. Other benefits of shoreline restoration include discouraging the presence of Canada geese, reducing maintenance costs, enhancing habitat for wildlife, and adding the beauty of wildflowers. The Park District is investing annually in these practices and has a maintenance plan that covers its ponds and streams for many decades. Woodlands, a little bit different. The biggest challenge to our native woodlands is invasive species, and that can come in the form of plants that move in or insects or other diseases that aren't necessarily native to this land. And by native, we mean like pre-pioneer times. A lot of things that come here are moved by humans, coming from other countries or things that maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to come over here naturally if we didn't bring them either intentionally or unintentionally.
An example of a plant might be garlic mustard, correct?
Exactly,
Okay.
yes. So these invasives disrupt a healthy ecosystem, and they can displace animals and insects that depend on our native species for food and shelter. So one example I'd like to give is the monarch butterfly, and I like to mention this one because I think a lot of people are familiar with the concept.
Right.
Monarch butterflies need to lay their eggs and raise the caterpillars on milkweed. They will not eat and survive on any other plant. So if there's no milkweed, there's no monarchs.
Okay.
This is one example that I think people are familiar with, but there's thousands of examples like this out there in our woodlands. Doug Tallamy is a research entomologist at the University of Delaware, and his name is really getting out there across the country, and he has such fascinating information about how insects and birds and everything, plants, all work together for the ecosystem. He's identified that 96% of our terrestrial birds rely on insects for food, and those insects rely on keystone native plants. So if you remove one of those keystone plants, you remove the insects that rely on them, and therefore the birds don't have those insects to eat and raise their young.
Wow.
So everything's connected in a way. When we have woodlands, some examples of the invasive plants that move in are Bradford pear, Norway maple, buckthorn, honeysuckle, garlic mustard, as you mentioned, and Japanese knotweed. These can dominate the understory of the woodland, forming a dense thicket. It blocks sunlight from reaching the forest floor, crowds out our native species, and some of them can even change the soil chemistry, like garlic mustard, and deplete nutrients for our native plants. And this creates an environment that's more favorable to the invasive plant than our native plants. So the Park District spends time removing these invasive plants, often in the winter months, to help restore our woodlands to healthy and diverse ecosystems. The last one is the Park Meadow Project. The Park District's initiative for this involves converting turf grass to meadow in strategic areas in selected parks. It involves planting native wildflowers, low prairie grasses, and the areas that we select for this are typically in stormwater detention basins, areas that are too wet for us to mow. A lot of times it's too wet to use for any recreation or anything, so it's really just an unsightly wet area of a park. So it makes more sense to put in some native plants that might start to benefit some of those wildlife that live out there in our parks, takes away an area that's just too wet and muddy all of the time. And those plants can actually help absorb some of the stormwater as well and filter them out before it makes it into our streams.
And it looks pretty too, the
Right.
wildflowers. What's an example, if residents aren't familiar with the Park Meadow Project, what's a kind of a visible example that they could visit to see that? On the Riverwalk, there's the
Riverwalk, we have the New Prairie Nature
Right.
Garden, which is near the Centennial area where we have the hockey rinks here for the winter time, but then in the summertime, that's going to be some native plants.
and that's been a nice addition too.
Yeah.
And
We
we're
have
always we're always looking to incorporate some new areas. So every year, staff gets together, works with our planning department, and we're identifying spots where it makes sense to add some new additions.
Sure. And that's been a years-long project. I think it was started back in 2019 or 2020 around
Right,
that time.
right. And so we've got various stages.
Sure.
A lot of those areas will take a couple of years to fully establish. So if you've got a recent addition in one of your parks and you're kind of worried about where it's at, give it a little bit of time.
It's going to look better and better.
A couple of years,
Right,
yes.
right, exactly. So, Tiffany, let's delve into a little bit more about the shoreline restoration aspect. I know that the Riverwalk in particular has been recently the site of shoreline restoration, and with this location being a highly trafficked area, I know that this has been of particular importance to you and your staff and really the community. What can Riverwalk visitors expect to see during the project, as well as several months or years from now as a result?
I started working on the Riverwalk maintenance crew in 2013. Since then, we've lost over a dozen trees just near the Grand Pavilion area that have uprooted and fallen into the river.
Oh, wow.
And if you picture a big tree that uproots, when it pulls those roots and everything, it takes a big chunk of the soil with it. So with all of the trees we've got along the shoreline, as we keep getting big floods and the tree roots are thick and near the surface, and they don't actually do a great job of holding the soil. So when those uproot and take a chunk with it, that's a chunk of the soil and the bank that's not there anymore. So the best options for shoreline restoration include those native prairie plants that I mentioned before, have those deep fibrous roots that when the river floods and comes by, it's going to sweep over the top of these plants, but they're going to hold the soil
It's
in
like
place.
a netting, I bet.
It's a netting
Sure.
underneath, and it also helps with the wildlife in the area as well. So the best options are those native grasses, sedges, and other prairie plants. So the project I mentioned, the Grand Pavilion area where those trees, this has been one of the biggest projects that we've had, and we just started this fall. We started with removing some of the dead or invasive or declining trees that were in that area. They went ahead and regraded some of the soil so we didn't have that steep drop off where we've lost some of those trees in the past. Makes it more of a gentle slope going down to the river. And then we're going to have those prairie plants coming back in. So you're going to see fewer trees, more wildflowers and prairie plants that are going to kind of be that line of defense against the walkway and kind of hold that in place for generations to come.
And make it look beautiful.
Yeah, and it's going to take about 3 to 5 years for some of these plants to establish and really start to look like something. So people are going to need to have a little bit of patience. The first year, it's almost going to look, we're in a transition state in a way. But in 3 to 5 years, it's going to start looking more like the finished product that it's going to be.
Well, and I'm sure that'll give a lot of comfort to our Riverwalk visitors because it's kind of a stark reality when you see the way that it looks now. But knowing that there's obviously a plan to make it beautiful and to make the ecosystem much more healthy, I think that's a benefit that we can all get behind.
And safety is the number one key as well. And we don't want the river to keep getting closer and closer and possibly jeopardize the structure of the walkways that we have out there as well.
Right. Wonderful. Kevin, I'm going to jump back to you here. So being green doesn't only pertain to how we manage and maintain our natural environment, it's also about the tools that we use to get the job done. So how is green technology changing the fleet of golf carts? And how does that change benefit the Park District and our patrons?
Yeah, it's a exciting time for our golf courses. Actually, our Board of Commissioners late last year approved the purchase of a brand new 60 cart fleet at Springbrook Golf Course, and that golf cart fleet will be all electric. So we're switching over from a previously gas-powered fleet to electric cart fleet now.
Right.
It's exciting now, obviously, for our patrons. They're going to see a lot of benefits with a smoother, quieter operation for their golf carts. But for the district as a whole, we were looking at it from the environmental stewardship and sustainability factors of electric. We're going to be saving thousands of gallons of gasoline each year. Obviously, the carbon emissions that go along with that is going to be reduced significantly. So we're going to have benefits beyond just our patrons. It's going to be benefiting our residents and all the people in Naperville as we reduce the amount of carbon we use each year. So this is going to be a win-win for everyone, we feel, and in the long run, it's going to save us not only in fuel costs but in expenses too. So it's a positive that we're looking forward to, and I know our patrons are also.
And continuing that stewardship.
Exactly.
That's great. What about Naperbrook?
Well, we're expecting that this will be a positive for us going forward. And as our Naperbrook carts come up for replacement in the next few years, we'll probably be looking down the same path for those carts also.
Wonderful. Glad to hear it. Tim, I'm going to jump back to you. So kind of going along the lines of the equipment conversation, Parks introduced autonomous mowers on a limited basis a couple of years ago, and this is an aspect that you've been growing since then. How does the autonomous technology improve your overall operations?
So the autonomous mowing is certainly something that we know garnered quite a bit of community interest since we started working with a local company, Havenshine Technology, about 4 years ago. So giving credit where it's due, prior to my ascension to the Director of Parks role in 2020, my predecessor and one of our former operations managers had begun working with Havenshine. And Havenshine was working on the autonomous technology, and they were kind of, really pushing the use of the electric mean green mowers. At that time, the concept of using that technology with a more green type of equipment, it was something we were investigating separately.
Okay.
Obviously, we're always on the lookout for green equipment, and we were also having some issues, hiring part-time staff. So it was kind of a neat idea to maybe solve two problems at once. So I could talk at length about the technology, which in itself is just pretty amazing. But getting back to a couple of key points, to your original question, the electric mowers benefit the environment by producing less noise and reduced energy consumption as compared to traditional mowers. And they also produce no direct emissions, so we're contributing to a cleaner air quality. We've selectively chosen parks that eliminate larger regions of mowing, so that our crews don't need to drive to one side of town, and that will reduce the amount of drive time that our staff will need to be on the roads. And then hiring a contractor allows us to reduce the amount of equipment we need to purchase and the amount of staff that we need to hire. Now, while the autonomous mowers are great at mowing wide open areas, due to all the safety features that they have installed, they still struggle to efficiently mow some of those densely packed areas where you might have a lot of trees
Sure.
or other park features. So Havenshine's taken on the challenge of solving the issue of the mowers in these densely packed areas. And we get the benefit of kind of staying abreast of these new developments in technology as they work towards finding a solution. And once they've worked through that problem and we're more confident in the use of the autonomous technology and how it will seamlessly integrate into our mowing on a day-to-day basis, it may be something that we look to eventually lease or purchase and add those types of mowers to our fleet. So it's something that we're continuing to keep an eye on, and before we fully jump in, we just want to make sure that any questions we still have are answered, and we've just got a great local partner that's kind of working with us on making sure that it's a good fit for us.
That's great. I mean, what an opportunity for them to be able to figure things out and for us to really take advantage of that.
It's really one of those relationships that benefits both sides.
Sure.
So like I said, it's something that we're definitely feel very fortunate to have partnered with them, and to see where that takes us to in the future.
Well, exactly. And I'm sure that, we've been doing this for a few years. I'm sure as technology advances and these kinks get worked out, that will just continue to become part of our operations.
Absolutely.
So pretty exciting. Tiffany, are there any other ways that your staff, particularly for the Riverwalk, are practicing environmental stewardship?
Yeah, we always keep that at the front of our mind, and similar to the IPM strategies that Kevin talked about, that's forefront of our mind as well. Also, other ways is like we pull the irrigation for the Riverwalk from the paddle boat quarry. So it's not using city water. We're using water that's held naturally out there.
Most people probably don't know that.
Right.
But that's fascinating.
Yeah. We do daily litter picking every day to make sure that we're not getting any pollutants into the river from people using the Riverwalk. We have a pollinator garden that's established on the east side of Rotary Hill, and we will be expanding that here in the spring of 2025. And similar to that project, we're looking at other areas where we have some unused turf areas, maybe on slopes or other areas that aren't really used as a turf area, and we're converting those to native plants as well. We don't typically salt the Riverwalk in the wintertime. We try to protect the river. Most of the time it gets cleared off. We use a broom to brush off the snow, and then typically the pavers don't ice over. Sometimes we do have to come in with some magnesium chloride, like yesterday when we got that drizzle that lasted all day. But other than that, we typically try not to salt and add that to the river. We incorporate LED lighting where we can. We've recently purchased 5 battery-powered tools to replace older gas-powered tools, things like a pole chainsaw, hedge trimmer, and string trimmers. And then in the Sint Woods, we try to leave some trunks of dead trees standing. If a tree dies and it's maybe a safety issue closer to the walkway, we trim off the parts that would reach the walkway if it were to fall over.
Okay.
And we leave that 10 to 15 foot tall trunk that you'll see a bunch of woodpecker holes in. Other animals start to move in there and make their nests. And so dead trees are actually a great habitat for wildlife. So we kind of take the safety factor of humans into effect, but then also leave what we can for the wildlife to utilize.
I love that. I love that. In Parks and Recreation, this is one subset, obviously. It's a very important thing in what we do, the parks aspect, but there's so much conservation and so much environmentalism that goes into what we do. It almost feels like things you'd be talking about like in a forest preserve district, but we're not. We're a park district. So it's fascinating to me.
The important thing, right, is it's not necessarily just one thing that everybody's looking to do.
Right.
There's so many little things that add up, and whether it's at the district and the maintenance departments or in some of our facilities and other things that staff can do, or the listeners at home, those little things add up and they can make a difference in the big picture.
Definitely. So I've got one more question, and Tim, I'm going to pitch it to you. Leveraging efficiencies is important district-wide, and I know that the Parks Department is always looking at ways to improve its operations. This year, you're going to be implementing new park software. So how will that new system enhance what you're currently doing and not only benefit your department and the district, but also the community?
So it's a topic that we're really excited about for 2025. It's going to be a pretty huge undertaking, but our new computerized maintenance management software, or CMMS, will not only benefit the Parks Department, but it'll be utilized by Kevin's staff in golf and also our trades and custodial divisions on a day-to-day basis. We also anticipate that several of the other districts' departments will be able to benefit from its implementation. So by offering a more centralized system used by multiple departments, we expect that it'll be able to foster additional collaborative opportunities amongst all of our staff. So the ability to incorporate the use of mobile technology is going to be a game changer for us. With our field staff, being able to take many of those activities they had to do in the office or do a hand-to-hand exchange of paperwork, they'll now be able to access their smartphones or their tablets and be able to do a lot of these things in the field. So not only will they realize greater efficiencies created by the ability to receive, collect, and transmit data on their devices in real time, but they'll now be able to perform activities such as accessing uploaded user manuals or view parts inventories, order parts, or review previous and upcoming work orders for the location that they're at. So maybe they can take on other assigned tasks that they weren't there originally to attend to, but since they're at that location, they can see what else is assigned for those areas.
It's like real-time management.
Yeah. So to be able to, like I said, handle those things and not have to travel back and forth to, their maintenance facilities and jump on a computer or get a phone call, but kind of handle those things as they pop up.
Huge.
It'll save so much time. Our new software will also provide GIS mapping with real-time updates. This will allow staff to visually locate and manage assets on a map. So that'll provide more of a spatial view of our maintenance needs and assets across that area. Again, so it's not just looking at spreadsheets or having something handed to you. It's being able to look at a map and say, this is close. Let me go handle that while I'm in the area. And it's a lot to digest. I mean, there will be a lot of different moving parts with it. But in the end, kind of two key words come to mind, and those would be accuracy and efficiency. So with all of our data tied into one central software hub, instead of, like I said, a mishmash of software and different spreadsheets, we expect our data to be much cleaner, and it'll really help to push forward those data-driven decisions where we can analyze and then extrapolate that information to make those smart, informed decisions. And be able to do it much quicker than we'd ever been able to do in the past. And the efficiencies gained from accessing most everything from a handheld device, again, such as our work orders, inspections, and then tying back to our original theme, the reduction of paper, the use of paper, and the amount of time we've got to spend back and forth driving on the road. We just really think that we'll be able to create a whole lot more time for staff and to actually, get that work done instead of a lot of the in-between activities that, tie up a lot of that time, between actually, digging the hole or planting the tree. We'll be able to, be out in the field and get a lot more done. So we're not expecting the system to be up until maybe late summer at the earliest, but we expect to start realizing the benefits of that system as soon as we're up and running. And it's just something that our crews really can't wait to get their hands on. It'll be a big change for golf. I know it'll be a new system and something that'll be a little bit different for them. But now the ability to, like we said, have that kind of centralized data source and be able to, really, work with each other's departments. Eventually getting to the point where maybe we're sharing inventories of product or parts. I think the sky's kind of the limit to where this might take us.
That's pretty exciting. And I would think, too, from a resident perspective, just us being able to, our staff being able to be more responsive, more quickly and get things done. I mean, that's a benefit to staff, whether you're talking about something happening in the parks or at the golf course. that's increased response time benefits everybody.
Absolutely. Many of our listeners will probably are familiar with our Parks 311 system,
Right.
where they could send in information or requests online. Our new software system will tie that directly into our work orders. So again, kind of speeding up that entire process, like you said, and then the ability for staff to maybe, see a request come in and say, I'm in the area, I'll go handle that right away. That overall, the speed and the efficiencies that we're gaining are going to be, pretty amazing.
Right, and definitely feeds into that whole stewardship theme, which
Yes.
is excellent. So being green obviously isn't something that's new to the Park District, but it's certainly something that we continue to grow into and to do more with. And I love it when we have these conversations because I even learn new things, which is very exciting to me. So I want to thank you for joining me today. Tim, Kevin, Tiffany, really appreciate your insight and expertise, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure being here.
Thank you for listening. The Naperville Park District's mission is to provide park and recreation experiences that promote healthy lives, healthy minds, and a healthy community. Park Talk Podcast is a production of the Naperville Park District.